Hyperdimension Neptunia has come such a long way since then, leading up with Game Maker, then with Riders vs Dogus, but my mind has been on Nep boredom due to playing / streaming every Neptunia game that existed. So I ended up going back to playing a classic and most respected Neptunia game in my opinion, as well as a challenging one for the PS3. Today we will go back in time to talk about the very first Neptunia game for the PS3, a very underrated game called Hyperdimension Neptunia 2011. Before anyone gets confused, I call it 2011 Neptunia because the game was released in the West around 2011 for us Western players, while the Japanese version dropped around 2010. But for Western players, we call it Hyperdimension Neptunia 2011. Why is it that Hyperdimension Neptunia is underrated in my opinion? Well, let's start from the beginning first. Hyperdimension Neptunia released for the PlayStation 3 in Japan around August 19th, 2010, and would later hit North America around February 15th, 2011. We start off in a world known as Game Industry, which is ruled and protected by 4 goddesses, but it wasn't always like this. You see, the world used to be united as one, but everything changed when the 4 goddesses were born, thus war had broke out between them to see who could rule this world. The world was then split into 4 lands where each land worships their goddess. Planeptune ruled by the goddess Purple Heart, Lastation ruled by the goddess Black Heart, Louis ruled by the goddess White Heart, Leanbox ruled by the goddess Green Heart. These 4 goddesses battle it out for the entire turf of Game Industry. However, during the battle between the 4 goddesses, Neptune, our main protagonist, got kicked out from Celestia and suffers a memory loss. She then meets Histoire, a tome who carries the all-being knowledge that can end the past and future wars, and is also sealed by Alfor, the main antagonist. Neptune, being the only one to speak to Histoire for now, was told that she must collect 4 key fragments from each land which is guarded by the guard Verminen, meaning that Neptune would be on a long journey, and on the journey we get introduced to characters like Compa, IF, as well as getting introduced to Noir, Blanc, and Vert, the goddesses of Lastation, Louis, and Leanbox. There's also guest characters, so we call them the Maker characters, who were DLC. Neptune, who is the goddess of Planeptune, must work together with the 3 goddesses to defeat R4. Now, what is it that I love about the first Hyperdimension Neptunia game? What makes it so underrated? Well, for one, there's the challenging difficulty thanks to NIS America, the people who also published Fairy Fencer F and Bleach Soul Resurrection around this time. NIS America also played a part in the release of this game, which would really make things a bit harder for newcomers to Neptunia. Neptunia has a difficulty change from easy to hard, meaning that new players who are, well, new to Neptunia would probably play on easy as a newcomer who wants to get into the story, but people avoid this one and play Rebirth, which is basically the remake of the first Neptunia, as well as a more easier experience and new battle system to where you can move your favorite characters and attack. And the best thing for newcomers is that NIS America isn't on this. The same for the later games, making Idea Factory's logo pop up on the lower right of the covers for the later games, except for Producing Perfection, since NIS America helped out in that too. We would later on follow up with a definitive remake called Reverse, but what was it like before all this, where Neptunia players would have to work much harder instead of the Neptunia games that are much easier nowadays? The first Hyperdimension Neptunia's gameplay before it switched up was this game had an exclusive third-person turn-based system where you attack enemies based on the amount of attack power you have. You can follow up with as much combos as you like and edit your combo skills. As someone who's enjoyed and played the game numerous times, I recommend Neptune Breaker. It will carry you through the whole game against annoying bosses. Then again, there's also the goddesses' other moves as well. Not even just Neptune has a crazy special move, but all the other goddesses have crazy moves as well. But you would have to honestly worry about unlocking them, particularly later on, because you have to defeat them in order to unlock them, which will also give you the key to the true ending too. And then you have, and this is the challenging part about this game, you have the items which your character uses automatically depending on the quantity of items you have. I'd say stock up on as much items as possible, because say you have at least 500 of any of the bottles you have, they can use it more oftenly. I say this because if you only have a little bit of bottles and your health is near death, you might as well start over. And we also have the item skills, which certain characters can also use more oftenly. depending on how high the percentage of characters' item skills are at, and I would recommend evening them out 50-50. I say that just in case you're low on healing items and antidotes, that way everyone's item skills come in handy. You see, when in a dungeon, normally for the Neptunia games after the 2011 version, you can choose to go up and face an enemy, but in the old days, you can't avoid them. You'll just get in a random encounter, and this is pretty much like a lot of RPG games back in the day too. So Neptunia isn't really like the only one. Certain RPG games have done this back then too. You can escape mid-battle unless you have an eject button. What can you do in the dungeon that's fun? Well, characters like Neptune and Red can break certain things that block the path, and IF and 5PB can find secret treasure chests, while Compa can trigger an enemy encounter for grinding in a wave of battle. I love the fact that Neptune was using a gun back then, and funny thing is that her adult version uses a gun in the later games. Another thing that makes this an underrated gem is the opening Ryusei no Bifrost by Now, which was also played in the Neptunia anime. Now is also the Japanese voice actor for 5PB, who is a DLC character in the first Neptunia game for PS3. And a fun fact is that the lyrics hint what Nepgear will also face in Mark II, meaning that the opening doesn't just speak for Neptune's battle that she's currently faced in the game, but the later battles to come in Mark II for Nepgear. Now also did Mark II's opening, as well as the anime's opening. However, I feel this opening is far more superior to the others because of the fact that it's the only Neptunia game opening that stands closer to an actual anime opening. I mean, don't get me wrong, the other openings are good, but this one gives off the anime opening vibe for at least a couple seconds near the end of the intro. I mean, the animation frames where we see our goddesses just look at us on the screen is just the perfect frame shots I've ever seen and just screams nostalgia. Speaking of the goddesses, another thing that makes the first one very exclusive is the goddess blog.
I want to try appointing someone as goddess for a day. What do you think? You'll only do everything.
Which is far better than rebirths, to be honest. The goddesses talk about random shit in their everyday lives as goddesses, and it's vocalized, but rebirth has no vocals for the blogs. I also love how the four nations are also split in this game with different atmosphere and settings, because all the later games doesn't show the beautiful 3D designs of the four nations anymore. Plus, there's the old classic detail they put into the four nations, like Planetoon has its regular futuristic intro as well as the mysterious soundtrack. Last Station's intro has that steampunk vibe to it, where the soundtrack starts up to a silent start and then builds up suspicion in the middle of the track. Louise's intro gives off a beautiful fairy tale winter wonderland, with the soundtrack giving off the vibe of having a fun time at the carnival. And just in case anyone asks me what my favorite nation is, it's Louise, because it's my kind of nation. Although for night views, I would say Planetoon looks great in the middle of the night. Now, Leanbox gives off a normal kind of vibe with a normal peaceful environment as well as a normal everyday life type of soundtrack. But when you get into the dungeons from all four nations, the soundtracks kick off real crazy. Not to mention the goddesses have banger boss battle soundtracks themselves. The game also has DLC content, which consists of quests that can help in grinding, costumes for the characters, DLC events that will unlock DLC characters like Red and 5PB, while battle tickets give you access to Nisa and Guts. Then you have the level cap, which expands the level to 999. Then boosters, which up the character's stats. Funny enough, you can still find the whole PS3 trilogy on the PlayStation Store for Hyperdimension Neptunia, and the DLC are there as well, but the OG is disc only, while Mark II and Victory can be bought digitally. I even got the classic theme from Mark II along with the OG profile pic of Blanc in her HDD Whiteheart form. It's good we get to see the different environments of the nations 3D wise, because the later games map have all the nations together where you can get there with one button, but the first one has you travel to each nation. Another detail I love is the game exclusive dungeons that you probably don't even see in the later games, like Pirate Ship, FX, Hyrule Castle, and although for Hyrule Castle, we would later on get another castle in Mark II called Land Castle, which is one of my favorite Neptunia dungeons. We also had the 2011 version of Celestia and what it looked like back then before it got a makeover in Rebirth. Now, we have all seen the HDD transformations in the franchise throughout all the games, especially Mega Dimension, since that game has more detail and more duration during the transformation. Well, 2011 had the old style transformation, which didn't have much animation, and same for the attacks and specials. This was mainly due to low budget as well as an inexperienced development team with an undeveloped game engine. You see, Compile Heart by the time used a system that proved too restricted for fluid animations, and which is why the combat was rebuilt for the sequel Hyperdimension Neptunia Mark II, which would succeed where the first Hyperdimension Neptunia 2011 had failed at. But aside from low budget animations and an inexperienced team, what else was the reason it failed? Well, for one, the random battles, which I do and don't mind. The items being used automatically instead of us being able to use them manually when we want to if we're in a pickle. And the shares lost for CPUs that fall in battle, and going to the dungeons back and forth to reach a landmass. Like, what would have been better is if we could just get there in one click right after we go through the dungeons once to reach them, but of course the later games would fix majority of those problems. Point is, I never cared because it was a challenge to me. The first Hyperdimension Neptunia is underrated and fine to me in my opinion, but it isn't because of the extreme length we had to go through to beat the game. I love the old aesthetics of the game and how Sunako's art designs had more depth to it for the OG and Mark II. I truly love the story. I love the opening as it stands out from the rest due to the fact that it has a couple seconds of animation, making it look like an actual anime opening. And yes, I'm fully aware we have a Neptunia anime. Aside from that, the slow gameplay you can honestly skip the animations for, but regardless, the battle depending on the level can still take long. The game has its ins and outs, but hey, that's every game. I get that the OG Neptunia wasn't likable by Western European and North American players, but hey, it was obviously loved in Japan due to the same reasons I favored it, that being its amazing humor and parodies, which is what we share practically for all Neptunia games. And as a Western player, I can definitely say that the original Hyperdimension Neptunia still is my favorite Neptunia game, along with the whole PS3 trilogy to this very day. I hope you guys enjoyed. If this video gets 1K views and about 20 to 30 likes, I'll consider dropping the next review for Neptunia Mark II. This is your boy Bonka X2, and I'm out.